Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jason Tucker. This is WPwatercooler, episode number 181. Today's topic is recommended WordPress caching plugins. Let's go around the room real quick and get everyone introduced.
Sounded like you said 101, but you said
181. Yeah,
101 plugin episode.
Practically.
101 plugins in 30 minutes.
Chris, we're in alphabetical order. You're the first one. Have at it.
Hi there, I'm Chris Lema, and I blog over at chrislema.com, and I'm on Twitter at chrislema. Thanks.
Awesome. Dave, how about you?
I'm Dave. I'm a software engineer and CTO at Spectrum Technologies, and we do e-commerce stuff.
Sweet. George, what say you?
I'm George Zafanis. I work at Automatic, and I really like cache.
Nice.
Awesome.
Cosper, what about you?
I'm Jason Cosper. I'm the developer advocate at WP Engine, and I'm extremely embarrassed for George right now.
Somebody's got to be.
Because those were singles. Jon Brown, how about you?
I'm Jon Brown. I'm the owner of a custom web development shop called 9 Seeds. Also a digital nomad and traveler. We build cool stuff with WordPress.
What about you, Lucy? How's it going?
It's going. Hey, I'm Lucy. I am with WPRocket, which happens to be a caching plugin, and I do customer happiness over there.
Awesome. Steve.
I am Steve Zengin. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive, and I run the OC WordPress meetup. And we're meeting tonight in my office at 7 p.m.
Woohoo! I will see you there. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me Jason Tucker on Twitter. I blog over at jasontucker.us and wpmedia.pro. So, today's topic, we're talking about caching. You know, when we were talking about this over the weekend, trying to figure out what we're going to be discussing, I thought, you know, I do have caching. I have Pagely and I have WP Engine. What else do I need?
That is
So
actually
people-
a very good caching strategy.
Very true.
If people don't know what caching is, it is when you're working with a modern CMS content management
Using
system.
a GPS. It's when you're using a GPS to find those little coins hidden behind trees.
That's
That's
geocaching.
geocaching.
Oh,
Yeah.
different.
What caching is, let me tell you a story. I'll take a page out of Chris's book and I'll tell a story. So, in days of yore, when we needed a new book or something, you'd go to a monastery and the scribe would sit and write your book out, finish it, and hand you a book.
5 years later.
But then Gutenberg came along and invented the printing press, which meant that you could spend a lot of time getting the pages together to print a book, but then from that one, it's a lot easier to print 1,000 copies. And that was a leap forward in technology at the time because it helped the rapid spread of knowledge around the world. Caching is like that. If I ask you, what's the square root of 79, you'd probably have to stop, look it up, and then give me a number. But right after you tell me the answer, I ask you again, what's the square root of 79? You already know the answer. You can just tell it back to me again. Caching's like that. Instead of having to recalculate the square root of 79 every single time, you can just remember the answer from last time and serve it right back out.
I don't know why we're bringing math into this, because that just makes it more complicated.
Because math rules the world.
Your modern CMS uses a database to store things, your articles, your posts, your pictures. There's a database. And caching lets you skip that database because, like George said, it saves it for you. So after one person makes a request of something, it'll save it so that the second person that asks gets it immediately without that trip back to the database to get it. So caching makes your site to your customers faster. It loads everything up faster. It moves everything up faster. And the reason we're having this article, the reason we're talking about this today is because we recently saw an article on WP Tavern about the fact that a caching plugin has not been abandoned, which of course, whenever you have to write an article that says it's not been abandoned, maybe you're wondering if it actually has been abandoned. But that makes you wonder, wait a minute, the older a plugin is, and this is true for pretty much any resource online, the older a plugin is or the older a article is online, the more time it has to get traffic and point links to it, etc. And so if you've been to a lot of WordCamps or you've done searches on Google and looked for a recommendation, you likely get some of the oldest solutions rather than the newest solutions, which does raise the potential that you're getting a recommendation that may be out of date. And so when we were talking about the topic, we thought, well, why don't we talk about cache plugins from a perspective of today, not what used to be awesome 3 years ago, but what may be awesome today. So Lucy, tell us a little about what WPRocket does.
Okay, so WPRocket is actually a premium caching plugin. We don't have a free version that's in the repo, but it's a page caching plugin. So it's not I don't know, object cache or some of these other types. I'm not sure if we're going to get into that, but specifically a page caching plugin. You basically just install it, activate it. Caching and a bunch of other sort of best practices in optimization are activated right away. We've got some other features like lazy load and minification and things like that, which you can choose to activate. But the main feature is page caching, and it's going to make your site faster.
Now, Cosper, if you're using someone like WP Engine, do we still recommend that people also add maybe 3 or 4 caching plugins to their site so that they can get as much caching as possible?
I want to go fast! I want to go fast!
Wait. At WP Engine, we specifically disallow most caching plugins. There is a single one that we actually currently allow, and that is WPRocket. It is because WPRocket does some additional optimizations, and they know and respect our caching layer and work within the constraints presented, and that's actually why I really love and respect WPRocket, is because they take all of the minification, all of the optimization parts, and effectively they can handle that while our caching layer does its thing.
So wait.
So you're saying
let's go back to a question that Chris asked. So if I'm not on WP Engine and I put 3 caching plugins in, then I get 3 times the caching?
Oh, totally.
Try it and see what happens.
Yeah.
That's like if I put all the SEO plugins in my site, then I get triple the SEO?
You kind of do.
That's what people do with security too, right? Just get 3 security plugins. And
just for our audience that doesn't understand, this last 30 seconds has been sarcasm.
Very much.
Do not do this.
Steve, can you look up sarcasm on Wikipedia?
Let me give an analogy, because I stomped on Chris's analogy. Sorry about that. You were rocking, and I totally interrupted you. But it's kind of like if you visit a website. This is the analogy I like to use. If you visit a website, it's like asking for a sandwich or to see what a sandwich looks like. And if the website has to build that whole sandwich from scratch to show you what it looks like, then that takes a lot of time. Whereas what caching does is somebody builds a sandwich and takes a picture of it. And now the next person who comes along gets to see a picture of the sandwich, right? They go, oh, that's what the sandwich looks like.
But what if I want the actual sandwich?
I can't eat a picture, Jon Brown.
I
could, I just don't want to.
You're just looking for the picture. But then within that sandwich, there's different kinds of caching, right? You have object caching, you have fragment caching, all of this geeky development technical stuff.
Sure, so object caching would be like having the turkey pre-sliced, so you don't have to slice it if you want to make a sandwich.
So there's sub-levels of caching within the sandwich.
Okay, but what if I'm having...
We start talking about things like fragment caching and object caching and everything else. And
are we saying that
and we also need to be careful with...
What if I want spicy mustard versus honey mustard?
But it also enables some of the sub-sandwich.
Now, when we're talking about WPRocket, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in Rocket. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Lucy, but there's a lot of stuff there that's far beyond just caching. It's also introducing a lot more optimizations, more akin to Google's mod page speed, for example.
Right. I mean, we have options for minification, CSS minification, JS, HTML. We have lazy load that you can activate. So these are some of the features that you can activate when you're on WP Engine, for example. So yeah, there are other things that WPRocket does in addition to the page caching. So yeah, we're super happy about being allowed on WP Engine, so customers can get those other features as well. But just to make it clear for everyone, no, do not add multiple caching plugins to your website.
I mean, historically, one of the most confusing things about caching plugins is that the settings and configuration screen for them used to be this list of like 50 options that nobody understood. I mean, I always thought for years that it'd be the best business plan if someone would just say, I am the guy that goes to every single person's website, charges them $50 a site, and just configures it to work well on their host.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
because so many folks would install it and think, okay, it's done now, right?
Well,
when you
and
really
that
need to
changed-
actually tune it.
And that changed over time, right? So WP Super Cache had an easy-to-use interface, and W3 Total Cache had a very advanced user interface, and then they flip-flopped, and now, right? So it's they evolve, kind of.
Well, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that there are different kinds of caching depending on your hosting.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the big issues with W3 Total Cache back in the day was that people would install it, and it would actually slow down their site. But the reason was because the default options relied on caching things, but there wasn't like memcached or any kind of object cache installed on really basic shared hosting. So it was writing that stuff to disk and in process actually slowing down page loads.
Yep.
But
So
it essentially is always going to be somewhat of a geeky technical thing to know what the best kind of caching is, and I think that lends itself to the end user needs either a prepackaged solution like WP Engine provides or Pagely provides, where they don't have to worry about it, or a really well-architected plugin like WP Rocket that kind of takes some of that stuff into account on its own.
But here's what you don't want, right? You don't want a free plugin that you install that then upsells you to the pro version and then disappears from the planet for 10 months and then needs an article on WP Tavern to tell you that it's still around. Right?
just a flesh wound.
Just because
Not dead yet.
well,
Turn me into a newt.
So the reality is when it comes to caching, the most important part of all this is whether you're evolving the UI or not, whether you're interacting with hosts well or not, is that there's an active engagement of the plugin and that it's taking awareness of how things are happening and how hosts are changing and how the software is changing, because the last thing you want is to be relying on a cache plugin that then doesn't activate or has conflicts with the most recent version of WordPress, right?
True.
So behind this, we've been talking up to this point about a number of different types of caching, about full-page caching, about fragment caching, about object caching. Let's give a very quick overview from the lowest level to the highest level of what each one is and some examples of each. So to start, object caching is a very low-level cache.
Wait, are we going to do it with the notion of a hamburger, a cheeseburger, a double cheeseburger, or a pastrami sandwich? What are we using?
I like pastrami sandwich on rye, but
It doesn't have enough parts.
It's my
though. We need
metaphor.
more
Make
layers.
it vegetarian.
Give me a club sandwich.
We don't use the 7-layer burrito. That's what we use for networking.
According to Wikipedia, a sandwich is.
Thank you,
So the
Steve.
most basic level of caching is the object cache, which is if you're asking your database saying, hey, get me post ID 87, your WordPress will talk to an object cache like memcached or Redis or something and say, here's post ID 87, remember this thing, and then spit it back out to me faster when I want it later.
And if you have no idea what memcache or Redis is, your host probably doesn't have it, so you don't need to worry about it.
But the point for non-techies that are watching is that is server specific.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Not all
entirely
servers
dependent
are
on
created equal.
Right. I mean, a lot of these things will integrate with an external, program running on your server, or the web app or the web server you're running on the server, or another server that lives between your web server and the users. So, I mean, that's object caching, which just stores bits of data. Then you can do fragment caching and whole page caching can actually live completely in WordPress. Fragment caching would, for example, store, this is what the header of my site looks like. I'm not going to rebuild that every single time that I happen to view a page. It's consistent across all my pages. So I'll just cache the header and spit that out. And there's not really a plugin that does that very well to my experience, but that can be done in themes pretty well.
But the reason you'd want something like that is because something like comments, right, is something you don't necessarily want cached, right? So you might want the rest of the page cached, but comments needs to be live, right? If you're using internal WordPress comments.
Yeah,
Sure.
the thing we most often wrap fragment caches around, and it's custom code to do it, is widgets. Like, we will have widgets or some kind of section of a site that's really expensive to generate popular posts or related posts or stuff like that.
And WordPress core provides a transients API, which is ideal for storing that.
Yep.
And actually will upsample itself and use a local server like Redis or Memcache if it's available.
Yeah, it's really the oil and vinegar on the sandwich.
So George, what's page caching?
So page caching then is what you see a lot of things like W3 Total Cache or Super Cache or Batcache do, which take the whole page once it's been done and it saves it either straight to disk or in Memcached or something, so it can pull it out and serve it up without having to generate everything on the page again. The tricky part is
HTML file.
Yes. So if you're over aggressive in your caching,
of the sandwich.
When someone sends in a new comment or says, "I hold the onions, please," you then have to go back and regenerate the entire page again, which is what Fragment Caching can help with, because then you can just take the onions out and say, "Here, take a picture of this."
Or you do it with JavaScript.
Right. Then beyond that, that's still in WordPress actually running it. Beyond that, you can have several things on the web server, like Nginx, which can handle its own full page caching, and then WordPress can invalidate that when needed. And Varnish, which is Nginx caching, will write the cache to disk, whereas Varnish, by my understanding, writes it into memory. So that lives in RAM, which is much, much quicker. And you want that to only be the most commonly hit things on the server. So if you have a page that's going viral, that might make it into Memcache, or might make it into Varnish. If you have images that are getting loaded by every page, that might make it into Varnish, because then the server doesn't even need to hit your local disk, whether that's a spin-up disk or solid-state drives. You can load it much more quickly and spit it out.
Yep. Excellent.
Drop the microphone, walk away.
Yeah.
So
and that's
that would be a magazine that the restaurant gives that has everything already in it.
And lovely. Yeah.
Those classic restaurant magazines.
That's the menu,
yes.
the picture menu of the entire thing.
And then Cloudflare is the concierge that tells you what they have.
So recently we saw an article by Taylor Lovett, and I think this has just been a most recent update. Is that right?
Yeah.
And he wrote an article called "Comparison of Popular WordPress Caching Solutions," and it has a kind of a rating and scoring for a whole bunch of different plugins. I don't think Dopey Rocket is there.
I think he only did the free plugins, the freely available plugins in the repo.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about the free plugins in the repo. I love WP Rocket, but what other options are out there these days? Because we talk about W3 Total Cache not being abandoned, but not actually being updated in 8 months. What else is out there that's good?
Well, if you want something that just works and is relatively simple, you may want to look at WP Super Cache.
Mm-hmm.
It does a lot of things. It doesn't do everything, but it does a lot of things that for someone who doesn't know a lot and is just like, look, I just want an easy solution. Let me just put it in place and let me run stuff on the page casting side. It does pretty well, and it's relatively easy to get installed and run.
Yeah, I've used Super Cache before starting work at WP Engine, where we don't require any sort of caching plugins. I've used WP Super Cache for years and years on other sites, and it's always fairly rock solid. It's basic, but it does the job you need it to do.
So it's basic because it doesn't include like the lowest level object caching kind of stuff.
Right.
Like it's a top level page cache. So if you have a mostly static site, like your typical business brochure marketing media site, it's a fantastic solution for that because you've got very static content.
If you're leaning on, if you do something like move your comments to something like discuss,
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that, that also is helpful for something like WP Super Cache, a static page cache like that.
For sure.
Look, WP Super Cache will get you pretty far, and for most basic sites that aren't doing a ton of traffic, it's fine. Where you get stuck sometimes with WP Supercache, or at least my clients do, is sometimes it'll hold on to those cache pages a little bit longer or get confused with logins. Right? So somebody who's not experienced with that may make a change to a post or add a new post and may not see that change immediately happen because it's gotten stuck, technical terms, stuck in WP Supercache. Right, and it just means that it hasn't gone through its timeout process yet, and not all servers are created equally. But like I said, for a free plugin, it'll get you pretty far.
I'm going to tell a quick story here of one of the reasons you need to be a little bit careful with all of the caching plugins. In this case, it was W3 Total Cache that was the topic of the story. But I had a client who every once in a while would email me, and I'm talking like a month or two apart, and be like, people are seeing old content on my site, and it was like a real estate listing kind of site, and they're like, they're seeing these properties from months ago. This was supposed to be fixed months ago. And really, frankly, irate, upset customer, and I would look at the site and it'd be totally fine. And I would check it, I would clear Cloudflare, I would clear like all of the stuff that she had running, and it was totally fine. And it wasn't until literally months later, when she was still having this problem, that I went digging through the server and realized that once upon a time we had installed W3 Total Cache. And when it got uninstalled, there was still an htaccess file out there somewhere where if you went to this one particular page, it would redirect you to a cached version of that page from 6 months ago.
Yep.
I just had a ticket like that this weekend.
One of the things you always have to be careful with these caching plugins is if you deactivate them, is how they clean themselves up, but also understand that once you install them, you are raising the hurdle of support, and there is a technical support hurdle that's going to happen even with the best of them.
Yeah, there's going to be a learning curve.
Where things are going to be more complicated than they would be if you weren't running it.
Yeah,
it's totally true.
You should probably actually just fully delete, not just deactivate. If you're
so John,
because they don't, Supercache and W3 don't necessarily remove stuff if you just deactivate.
It's like pastrami that's left in the corner of your
Stop
it. And it's just been sitting there for days and days, and you don't realize
I would say it's more like a banana pepper that accidentally got put on your sandwich and everything still tastes like banana pepper.
From what Lucy was saying, if you are just going to delete a plugin, that's fine, but do make sure you actually deactivate it first, because there are uninstall hooks that may try to remove a couple lines that they may have added earlier to your htaccess.
I mean deactivate.
Delete's fine, but don't just delete it when it's alive.
Yeah, don't delete it via FTP and expect it to just magically clean itself up after.
Well, most of the stuff, doesn't this stuff end up getting stored in the uploads directory anyhow? So you may want to even look in there just to see if that stuff. No, that stuff's not stored there anymore.
No, it depends on which plugin you're using.
Yeah, they're all different. WP content /cache, W3 content /W3TC. You'll see all sorts of different things.
They may actually change some settings. There's that object. What's that caching settings file that gets put into WP content?
Yeah.
Advanced cache.php.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. They'll change that, and then they'll also put an htaccess rules that'll proxy you to the root. So, yeah, I've seen all sorts of things.
So I guess the main thing is none of these are the same. They're all different. They're all going about it a different way, and you're definitely going to need to dig around in some documentation to figure out, did it actually remove itself, and is something laying there.
And the key to this is really, and we've talked about it several times, on this water cooler so far. The key is to figure out what the actual problem is that you're trying to solve, right? So that's why you need to work with a developer. If you're actually having slowness, you need to find out where that slowness is happening so that you're addressing it and not putting a Band-Aid on. A lot of these caching plugins are Band-Aids, frankly, for something that could be fixed differently.
Yeah, it might just be a server host configuration that needs to be changed.
Right. It might be a poorly developed theme or a plugin that's just causing some slowness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of themes that are poorly coded that are doing things like querying every single comment individually from admin Ajax and just spiking loads like you wouldn't believe. That are just doing horrible things, and then you're like, no plugin is going to magically fix that.
Yeah.
And again, it may be a well-designed plugin that you just have configured incorrectly. I had a site recently, and I had the security plugin running on it. Nothing wrong with the security plugin, but there was a conflict with the way it was sending out emails that was causing some server slowness, right? And because it was generating emails, it was creating a backlog, right? So again, there's so many things that could go wrong on a server. A caching plugin could be just a band-aid for finding what the actual problem is.
I mean, in the end, caching is easy. In properly invalidating a cache, that's where the hard problems come in. So knowing I've updated this post or I've deleted this comment, what all things do I need to purge the cache from so that they rebuild? You may have thought, okay, great, I'll just delete the front-end cache. Are you caching your RSS feed? Are you caching some response data from the WP JSON API? Are you caching somewhere else that it may still be stuck?
So I was going to make a joke earlier with Jon Brown because when your client contacted you,
bring it on.
When your client contacted you, I'm sure your response was, "Well, it's working for me," and then you just went about your business.
Not a little bit more than that, but
no.
I'll allow it.
Here's the deal: if something
doesn't get
like that, if something's going wrong like that, where you're seeing something different than your client or whoever's testing, one of the keys is to figure out what the difference is in your browsers, right? Open an incognito window so that you've got no other settings going on. Make sure you're looking at the same thing, because the other cache that we didn't talk about is browser cache, right? So far, all we talked about is server cache. When you're having that kind of problem, it might just be a browser cache issue.
Which is where we went with that one.
Yeah.
Or it could be a proxy, which I've had this happen with both here at my work as well as other places. They'll have a proxy sitting between them and the internet, and all that stuff's getting cached there, and then they're refreshing the page wondering why hasn't it been updated. And they just didn't set any rules up to to not
Steve
do
doesn't
that.
get into these problems. He manages his clients so that these things don't happen. He's constantly managing expectations, but for the rest of
but the absolute worst caching gotcha of all is the DNS cache.
Yeah.
You just moved your website from one server to another, and you had a very long-lived DNS cache. For if you have a 1-week DNS cache or a 1-month DNS cache, someone could pull up your website. You could be seeing it on the right server, but their ISP has the old server cache. So they're looking at the old server on GoDaddy where it used to be. We're just like, I'm on WP Engine over here. I'm fast as lightning, but they're looking to GoDaddy and not.
Yeah, I just dealt with that with a client in Wyoming on a rural ISP who could not get to her site for 2 weeks. Could not get to her site directly. She could tether to her phone and get to her site just fine, but her ISP had her DNS cache forever.
Was it satellite internet, perchance?
I think it was some.
They are evil when it comes to caching.
No, they are. I used to be on that. Remember, I used to live off grid, but I know all too well.
I want to finish out one of the things I talked about was an incognito window. The reason that's important is if you've got a caching plugin set up, right, there's a difference between a logged-in user and a non-logged-in user, right? So WP Supercache typically will not cache anything for a logged-in user, but cache everything for a non-logged-in user. So the incognito window clears all that out, and it lets you see the site as if you're a non-logged-in user. You have none of those settings going on, and so you're going to bypass the cache. Or I'm sorry, cache is actually going to be activated at that point. If you're logged in, you're bypassing the cache. So there is a big difference there.
So Steve's talking about the cookie that comes with the sandwich.
Oh my God!
And he brought it around full circle.
Cosper always delivers.
Oh, wow.
The metaphor that doesn't stop giving.
So, folks,
please make it stop.
If you're hungry today, check out WP Engine or Pagely or I think SiteGround also has their own caching solution. When you look at managed hosts, they will have some caching for you. If not, be sure to check out WP Rocket, as they're one of the best, and they're doing a lot more than just caching, but it will be awesome and helpful.
Sweet. Well, thank you all for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. Make sure you go to our website at WPwatercooler.com and click on the links there to subscribe. If you like this particular episode, click the thumbs up link. We would love to let everybody know on the interwebs that you watched it and that you enjoyed it. And if you have any comments, suggestions, tips, tricks, whatever, anything like that, make sure you put those in the box below. Thanks, folks. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.